Hey, B fam, welcome to another episode of Enjoying Your Blended Family. And today's episode, we're going to talk about things that might scare you. But don't worry, because by the end of the episode, hopefully you're going to be just as prepared to face those fears just head on and continue to move forward in your life where nothing is holding you back. And I have a special guest today, and she is on here. It's Jen Miller from Thrive by Action. She is on here because this is an area that she's kind of been avoiding. And by her coming on this episode today is her actually facing her fears too. And we're going to talk about some of the importance of why. Why do we even need to do things that scare us? And then how can those things, when we step up to do things that scare us, how can that make our life better? So stick with us, because in just a minute, we're going to lay it all out on the table right after this. All right, guys. So here we are. I'm going to let Jen introduce herself, tell you a little bit about her family and her family dynamics before we dig in. She's actually been on Enjoying Your Blended Family before. We are social media friends. We've actually taken a course together, which is how we met. And we've had her on talking about self-care in the past. And right after she introduces herself, I'm going to tell you how this episode unfolded. All right, Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen Miller. I'm from Thrive by Action. And my main focus through Thrive by Action is encouraging women and moms to prioritize themselves and take their lives back into control so that it starts being something that they're actively doing instead of passively sort of existing through. And a big piece of that, which Scarlett just mentioned, is self-care. And when we say that, I always need to sort of explain that that's not your, just bubble baths and manicures and pampering kind of ideas. It's really so much broader. It is about showing up for yourself. It's about growth. It's about relationships. It's about essentially like figuring out what your priorities are, figuring out what your body, your mind, and your spirit needs, and then tending to those needs. And one of the way that this kind of came in, I'll let her do the whole story, is because one way that I care for myself is by pushing myself out of my comfort zone and doing things that scare me. And I'll let her explain what about today is scary. But I am a mom of two. My kids are a boy and a girl, 11 and 13. And I also work full time outside of the house, although sometimes now I'm working from the house as well. We a little bit of remote work going on. And then I have the Thrive by Action side. So as my daughter says, I have two jobs right now. But when you're doing something that you love and you have a reason and you want to be helping people with the things that you figured out for yourself through your own journey, like, it doesn't feel like a second job, of course. So that's sort of where I come from. We are not a blended family, but I think a lot of this stuff can apply to anybody, right? Can apply, it's not even just women focused. That's mainly who I speak to, but I think anyone can take these lessons and apply them to their own lives and really see some positive outcomes from it.
Yes. So, and yeah, I didn't mention that, but you aren't a blended family, but these things, yeah, they can, like what we're talking about today, can help anyone. It's really for the person who's choosing to be intentional in their life. And I know that's how you help women out. And you and I met because of a group that we were doing. We were both starting our own business, our own side hustle. And with that comes a lot of different parts that you don't really know what to do or how to do it, and you need someone to coach you through it. And so Jen and I were put in this small group. Out of all of these people in it, we were put in it together, and we just kind of clicked for some reason. And I just enjoy watching your stuff and learning from you. And so one of the things that Jen does is this intention for every month. So instead of just living passively, like she says, she'll post each month, like, here are the set of things that I am going to accomplish this month. And then by the end of the month, she checks off the things that she has done. And for a couple months in a row, I think several months, the one of do something that scares me kept being left unchecked. And so I was like, huh, okay. So I asked her, oh, is there just nothing that scares you? Or you're just not picking something? Like, why is it that you're not doing it? And so she opened up a little bit. I guess I'll let you tell him that. So what were the things I asked you, like that question? Is it that you're not choosing something, or there's nothing that scares you, or what's the reason? And what'd you say?
First of all, I feel like my list of fears is probably endless, and I feel like a lot of people can sympathize with that. And we're not talking just, oh, I'm afraid of spiders, or I'm afraid of, heights or things like that. I mean, although those could definitely be part of it, right? Um, for me, it's doing something scary, but it's just like I said, it's pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. It's doing things that you feel resistance towards, and a lot of times that resistance is just fear. It's just disguised. Sometimes you'd be like, I don't want to do that, and when you really are honest with yourself, it is something that you would want to do, but for whatever reason you're afraid to take that risk. You're afraid to move forward. You're afraid to even admit that you want it, because if you can't have it or it doesn't work out, then it feels like a failure. It feels like you've lost something. But if you can never, if you never admit that that's something that you're wanting, you kind of put up that protective wall in front of you. So I told her, first of all, I have a million fears. So that is definitely not it. And what I realized is that in the first year of doing this, and just to clarify, when she says several months, my intentions typically change largely from month to month. There are times where something will carry over a couple months if, like, I'm still working through something or it's still really top of list for me. But there is one thing that I've left on, and it's do something that scares me. And the reason why I left it on there is because through lots of looking inward and talking with friends and being in a mindset membership where, this stuff comes up a lot, we realized that was the source of a lot of my personal growth, my mindset growth over the last couple of years. And when you kind of stumble across and have that realization that some of the biggest moments and the biggest wins I can remember having came from the things that I did that scared me, it's like, why not push yourself to do that all the time, every month or every quarter or every year or every opportunity you get? And that was part of it, is that I realized that in starting a business, that's where I had to face a lot of fears. I never wanted to have my face on social media. Clearly, I had to get over that. I mean, there's ways to do it where you don't have to, right? Like, there's certain businesses that it's not about your face, but sometimes it even helps to have a personal presence, to put a face to a name, to have people feel like they know you and know the person behind the business. But I had to get over that. I did my first Instagram reel, and I was like, oh, I am definitely not doing those. And then I did one, and it was like, okay, I survived, like it was nerve-wracking, but I did it, and then it was like the next opportunity came up, or the next natural progression, and something that I felt like I was doing in my business as building the business. I have talked to a small business owner about like possibly doing like a workshop at her business and having a collaboration. And that was terrifying for me. I am such an introvert. I mean, I can talk your ear off. So if you like equate it to how much I'm going to blabber, like, it's deceiving. I'm very much an introvert. I do not like public speaking. I definitely don't like talking to strangers. I feel very socially awkward. I don't like putting myself out there. I don't like making myself vulnerable. And a lot of that comes back to what your fears are, right? And the funny thing is that the program that Scarlett mentioned, the leader of that program had written a book, and she gave it to, I think she gave it, or maybe I bought it, I can't remember, but it was a book called Do It Scared by Ruth Sukup. And I read it, and it's a very quick read. And she had a quiz, and it helped you identify where your fears lie. And there were I think it was 7 types. And the book was fascinating. I'm like a psychology major, so anything having to do with what makes people tick and why people do things or don't do things is like super fascinating to me. So I think that's where the seed of like doing things despite being scared of them, or because you're afraid of them, or because you're resistant to them, really started. And like I said, I felt like I had a lot of opportunities, and the hard part was saying yes to an opportunity. Because, you know, if Scarlett said, "Hey, do you want to be on my podcast?" my initial thing would be like, "Oh my God, I can't do that. That's terrifying." And like I said, I did it once before. And even then it was very much, like I said, while I'm really friendly with Scarlett, knowing that there's other people that are going to see this and hear this, and it's going to be out in the public is like, I am nervous beyond belief. But what you find is when you do those things that you didn't think you could do, that you felt resistance towards, that you almost didn't let yourself acknowledge that you wanted, it feels amazing once you've done it. It brings on confidence, it emboldens you. And even if they don't go perfectly well, like if I came on here and stumbled over my words and didn't like how I looked on camera and felt like I, didn't take advantage of the opportunity, I would still be happy that I did it because I showed myself that I could do it. And if you can do it once, you can do it again. And what happens is as you start breaking these fears down, like showing yourself that like they're not bigger than you, then you start picking bigger things. You start feeling that momentum of strength, of confidence, of proving to yourself. It's kind of bad to say you want to prove yourself wrong, but when you are like, wow, this is have you ever had a moment where you felt like this was something I could never imagine myself doing, or I never thought I could do this thing? Think back to those moments and feel like how good that felt through your whole body, and not just in like 10-minute increments. It's like that was probably something that lived with you and stuck with you for quite a long time. And like I said, that's why I feel like it's one of the biggest contributors to growth for me and for anybody who does that, who takes action and not only says yes to opportunities that arise, but also seeks out those opportunities. And that's where I think my checkbox wasn't getting checked for several months. It's that these opportunities weren't, coming across my path or stumbling, into my life. And it is harder when you have to sit down and think, okay, now what am I afraid of? And what can I do, actively, intentionally this month to, kind of encounter that and overcome that thing. And so when she was like, what are you scared of? One of the things I said was public speaking, being vulnerable, opening up. And she's like, okay, well, how about this? Why don't you come on and do this podcast, and we'll, and you got to come on and you got to be real and you got to be vulnerable. And I was like, gulp, I was like, oh God, okay, I've stepped in it. So I just got to say yes and do it. Like, I was like, I can't let myself overthink it. I can't, because once I let my brain take control of that, it was going to be any reason and excuse not to do it, or I can't find a time that works, or I'm too busy right now, or it doesn't fit into, your podcast schedule. But I was just like, okay, I'm saying yes right now, and just let's go.
Doing it scared. Yes. And that book, actually, I don't know that I read the book. I can't remember because I read one of her books, but I listened to her podcast.
Yeah.
And I listened to every episode, and she would interview all these people that did things scared. And that just built up my confidence as well. And at first, it was like when I'm thinking of like, well, what am I scared of? And I remember during the time I was listening to her podcast, and we were doing something with our youth group, and they had these like hissing cockroaches. And I was like, oh, no, no, no. It was like a fear factor kind of thing. So it's like, things that would scare you. And that actually was bug related. And so I said no. And the kids are like, come on, come on. I was like, you know what? Let's do it. Let's do it. So I held the hissing cockroach in my hand all the way up to my face. And just that little thing, as silly as it was, it facing that fear, I thought, oh, okay. Well, if I can do that, what else? And that really had no real value besides building up my confidence in that. What else scares me? And so I began to look at things like that and seeing like, okay, well, this scares me. Why does it scare me? Okay, well, I'm just going to put myself out there. And it's that fear of like, what if I fail? Like, what if I fall on my face? What if people laugh at me? And that right there will stop you from moving forward in so many different areas. And you said it perfectly about these things. When we choose to do them anyways, it's building up that confidence every time. And when that opportunity comes and we say yes, and we learn and we grow through it, even if it's not perfect, we get better at it. And so yes, I agree with you and all of that. So just curious, you named some of the things that scare you. And this does, I think it counts as public speaking. I know it's not quite the same as being in a room and having people like staring back at you, but there's still a lot getting on here. And like, when's it my turn? And when do I shut up? And when do I insert this? There's so many different things going on at the same time. So just showing up is huge. But what is it, if you really think about it, that what are you scared of? What are you afraid? Like if you were to play out the scene, like what would be the worst case scenario?
Well, that's a lot of the thing too with doing these things. Because, like I said, like even if something doesn't go perfectly, I think you've shown your brain. Okay, so we all have this like little. Sometimes you've heard it called like a lizard brain, right? Or it's this primal undeveloped part of our brain in humans that is all about its whole purpose is keeping us safe. And when you think of that now, it's a very different connotation than like when they're, like cavemen days and even, 100 years ago. There were a lot of different fears that people were having to do. This was about, a lot of it had to do about physically keeping yourself safe. But your brain, essentially, anytime there's something new and novel, it essentially scans that situation to try to identify if it's dangerous. And that's where a lot of your fear comes from, is from the unknown, from, what's the worst case scenario, and so even doing something imperfectly, and how many people do things perfect the first time, like next to none of us. But doing something imperfectly, or even if it was like, oh God, that was a disaster. Was it really as bad as your worst case scenario that you played out in your brain? Probably not. And you realize that, oh my gosh, this didn't go well, but guess what? Like, I survived it. I'm here. I'm through it. I'm on the other side. Even that is confidence building. Like, because you've actually shown your brain evidence that you're bigger, you're braver, you're bolder than that thing. That it didn't destroy your entire life. It didn't, like have your world crumble around you. I mean, I think in public speaking, people fear, like I said, stumbling across your words, not coming up with the right thing to say, putting your foot in your mouth, or accidentally saying something that like maybe not on here, but all the time when I'm around people, I'm one of those people that accidentally does like backhanded compliments, and I really don't mean any harm by whatever I said. And then in hindsight, I'm like, oh my God, they could have taken it totally out of context. Like, I just sometimes I think my mouth works faster than my brain. And then when I realize what I just said, I'm like, ooh, that might have not come off right. And not like in a malicious way, but just in a like, maybe I worded something funny, or if it came off just sounding, weird, or, and so, with public speaking, I think that's it. And it's the fear of being seen, that in itself is such a big deal. Like it's saying, I'm here, I'm someone with something to say. A lot of people have fear of, and like you said, public speaking can be, giving a presentation at work. It can be getting up on a stage in front of a whole, auditorium of people. And that to me still would be like, I think I might pass out. But it is even doing things like this because I know in my brain that other people are going to see this and that, it's going to be out there. Like, you have no idea who's going to view this. And sometimes knowing that people are going to see this is almost scarier than thinking a stranger is going to see it, right? Because they know you. And then the fear turns to judgment, rejection. I mean, there's so many fears, and sometimes it doesn't even seem logical. As much as people fear failure, sometimes people fear success. I mean, and for me, it's like, what? Like the first time I heard that, I'm like, what does that mean? Like, what do you mean people are fearing, you hear fear of failure, but then I heard fear of success and it's like, right, because then what? What are the expectations if this does take off? What if I have a viral video and all of a sudden all of the attention that comes from it, it's like now there's a million eyes on me. There's a lot of things that can come by things going well as well that people can worry about. And so, like I said, the vulnerability piece of it is something that I'm going to say accidentally offend someone, or are they going to judge me because of something that I revealed about my life? Are they going to unlike or unfollow me on my own account? And, as far as that goes, I'm not all about how many, the numbers and yeah, sure, everyone would like to see that they have more people, but a lot of times that's just because they really want to find their people. I would much rather have 100 people following me or showing up at my house. I mean, could you imagine 100 people being like, we love you, we want to come to your house and spend the day and hear what you have to say? So like when you bring it into like real life, as opposed to, oh, I have 100 followers somewhere out in the universe here. I'd rather have 100 people who are really like, feel me and get it and connect and, are learning and growing through things that I say, then if somebody gets, are like, I didn't really feel her live on this podcast, I'm going to unlike her. Well, then they're not my person, it's like, but at the beginning, anytime, oh my gosh, I got one person who unsubscribed from my mailing list, the very first person. And I was like, what did I do? They don't like me. I mean, it's just, sometimes the things are so silly, but like I said, that little brain inside of you is like, what went wrong? What happened? What did I do? And sometimes it's not about anything you did or didn't do, right? And the perfect example of that is somebody who unsubscribed, I found out they were on my list twice with 2 separate emails. And I had no idea. And it was somebody who I sort of knew in person, like through social media and things. And they said something to me like, oh, I was doing a digital declutter and I realized that I got your email list on 2 different of my emails. And I was like, oh, I bet you were that person that I like obsessed about for 30 minutes. Like, what happened? What was it in that email I just sent that like rubbed them the wrong way? You can't make those assumptions. So sometimes these fears and these doubts and whatever we have about what we're doing are completely unfounded. And by doing more of them, you realize that like you start learning those lessons. You start being able to let things roll off your back and not take things personally. You start to understand that like, yeah, you're not necessarily going to be for everybody. And that's okay. Like you're there for the people who are your people. Even when you look at someone like Taylor Swift, and it's just, she's so topical right now. And I'm in the Chicagoland area. And so we just had her concerts here a couple weeks ago. And it was like Taylor mania. Like all you saw on anything around here was Taylor related. And whether you're a fan or not, and I mean, I like her, but I'm not like a super fan. But the reason I mention that is her tour right now sold out in a blink of an eye. There are more people that want to see her than she could possibly do shows in 1 year. There are people who are sitting outside of Soldiers Field, which is the big outdoor stadium she performed in, just to hear her. They were like on the grass, all camped out all around the outside of this place. Like, but you know what? there are a ton of people who can't stand Taylor Swift and who think she's garbage and who would trash talk her and say, this person's better or this person's better. And it just goes to show you that, like, even for someone who's one of the biggest pop stars in the whole, universe, she still has people who aren't her people. So, like, when you do things, you start to see those connections, you start to learn those lessons, you start to understand that, like, all the things you're afraid of are, like, they're not all illogical, but sometimes, like, they just don't make sense. And you're showing your brain that so that you don't start to avoid them so much. You start to almost embrace them because you're like, okay, what am I going to learn from the next thing that I encounter, that I overcome, that I take on this month? Because, and that's what I said, that's where this growth comes from. So it's about you building confidence and overcoming and showing you and whoever else. I mean, I'd say it's more for me than for anybody else, but that you can do hard things, that you're brave, that you're, I wouldn't say, I never say fearless, because I think that's, nobody's fearless, and even my young daughter, we would always say when she was little, like, what is being brave? And she's like, and some people would say, well, it's being fearless, not being afraid of things. And I said, absolutely not. I said, because if you weren't afraid, there'd be no reason not to do it, right? If there was no fear there, why wouldn't you do the thing? That's not the issue. It's the fact that you feel scared and you still walk forward. And that's what, being brave is. And so it's kind of all ties back to that. It's that you're never going to have a life where nothing seems hard, where nothing is scary. It's learning to live with it and understand that, like, you can do those hard and scary things, that not everything's going to work out perfectly, but chances are they're not going to be as hard or as scary as you really thought they were in the first place.
So with that being said, have you ever done something, or like if you think back to the very beginning before you were able to see all the positives that come from it, where you put yourself out there and it failed? Like, do you have one of those stories to share?
God, I wish I had a really good story. I'm sure I failed at things a million times. I mean, I think some of it is, like, I've put myself out there to people who, maybe I met, like, one of my kids' friends' moms, and I was like, oh, this woman's amazing. And, like, I really want to seek out a friendship with her. And I sort of got, like, cold shouldered or rejected. And it was like, oh, like, and again, you start thinking, like, oh, what is wrong with me? Like, what, you start assuming the worst. And, perhaps, and maybe I never knew why we didn't become friends, but, like, I know now that, like, I try to flip the situation, right? Like, oh, what if it's me? Like, maybe I just, like, am too busy in my life to, like, welcome the time and effort it takes to, like, foster a new friendship. Like, maybe I didn't even catch the vibe that this person was sort of reaching out. Sometimes I feel like I'm a little bit clueless when people are like, we'll be out somewhere and my husband's like, oh, did you get her number? And I was like, just like someone who was maybe, like, out at a party, but I didn't know her herself. And I was like, you were chatting all night. Like, did you guys not necessarily get her number, but, like, did you guys connect? Did you whatever? And it's like, no. And he's like, why not? I'm like, I don't know. And all of a sudden I'm like, God, did I fail it? Like, should I don't know. Like, so you start, whatever the situation is, I'm trying to think of something that, like, I mean, believe me, I've put out reels that I think are horrible. I mean, people say this all the time, and it's not like I've been doing this for 15 years, but I still go back to my early reels or a video of a live I did, and I'm just like, oh my God, this is so cringy. It's so bad, like, and some people are like, I can never go back and look at my old stuff because it's so bad. But I'm like, but then it reminds me how far I've come, so it's like, I just always now, because of doing this so often, look at it from, like, what can I learn? How have I grown? Like, what, how far have I come? And so, yeah, maybe I need to, next time I need to brainstorm. I'm sure there's an example
But
because
what about the flip of it? Is there a time where you were so scared to do something, but you said yes, you showed up, you did it anyways, and afterwards you were just like, I did it.
I mean, all the time. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's how I feel even after little things. Now, the very first time last year in 2022, I had made like a intentions list for the year, and one of the things was be a podcast guest for the first time. And honestly, I felt like that was a huge, like, that was like top of the mountain at the moment for me. Like, wow, if that could happen this year. And a social media kind of friend of mine who I had also done a program with, I had put my list out there. She saw it. She goes, okay. She's like, we're scheduling a podcast. I'm like, what? And she's like, you need to be on my podcast. And she's like, I saw your list and I'm holding you to it. And I was like, oh my God, I was like deer in the headlights. I was like, I said I wanted to do this and I thought perhaps I was ready, but I was so not ready. But again, I was like, well, better jump. Like, this is, like, that's the biggest thing too, is that the more you practice that saying yes, the more you're willing to do it. It's like a muscle. I know that if I let my brain take over, I would talk myself out of it. I would make excuses that seem completely logical why I can't or shouldn't or whatever do that thing. And now I'm just like, nope, yes, the answer is yes. And then I just stick with it. And I think with a lot of us, that's the hardest part, is that we hit resistance and we back down. We hit resistance and we put a wall up. We hit resistance and suddenly we decide we didn't really want that thing. And that's just a defense mechanism, we have. And so, yeah, I mean, being on a podcast interview the very first time was probably one of the biggest ones I did. But other things too, like I say I don't have a huge fear of heights. I'd like to phrase it like I have a fear of falling from high places. I don't have any problem being in a plane. I've been on the top of tall things. Those don't scare me. But 2 summers ago, we were in Seattle and we went to the Space Needle. And because I've seen how much this facing your fear thing is like a fantastic tool for myself, I try to, it leaks out into my family and my kids and my mothering. And so my daughter does not like heights. And you have to take this elevator up, like the center of it, and it's glass, so you can see as you're going up. And she was like a little freaked out. So I held her hand. I'm like, you can do this. Like, we kind of gave her a little pep talk. She got in and she did it. And so I was like, see how good that feels when, and so we try to talk even ourselves through it. But I talk her through things. So that part didn't bother me. But we get to the top and there's parts where you can walk on where the floor is glass, where you can just see down and you're standing on top of it. And suddenly my heart was in my stomach and I was like, oh God, and there's no reason I had to walk on the glass part. But my daughter goes to walk on it and I go to walk around and she's like, Mom. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think I want to walk on that part of the floor. She's like, I was scared to come up in the elevator and you told me just to do it and to face my fear. And so she's like, turned it right back around on me. And I was like, okay, how do I say no to this 10-year-old at the time or 9-year-old who's like, Mom, do the scary thing. And I was like, okay. And it wasn't the biggest thing in the world, but it was definitely something that I could have easily just avoided doing. And I did it. And I was like, okay, it's fine. I still don't love this, but nothing bad happened. I, was able to say yes, that I know the next time if I did that, it would be that much easier for me to walk across that, that glass floor. So yeah, there's lots of times where I do things, whether it's, it's something like public speaking or whether it's something like heights or, holding an insect that is terrifying to you or whatever. There's so many approaches to this that you can take and they all feel good when you get through it.
Yeah, because I think there's definitely different categories because sort of along the lines with what you're saying, there's some things that you can face your fears, and it really doesn't have a huge positive or negative. It's just something that's holding you back. Like for me, it was karaoke. I was shut down on this like rock band game like a decade ago, and I went to go sing, and it like shut the game down. Like it couldn't even register my voice, kind of thing. And I was trying to be brave and do that. And so I have like never sung karaoke again till we had this woman's retreat and they were doing karaoke. And I was like, nope. But there's this thing inside of me that wants to do it, like you were saying. Like it's like I want to be able to get up there and let loose and have a good time, and it not be like I have to have alcohol or something in me to be able to be free like that. But then there's that thing inside of me that says, you can't sing, like don't get up there, you're going to make a fool of yourself. And so I had this whole internal battle, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So I finally just said the words out loud to the girl next to me. If you go up there, I'll go up there with you. Because she kind of was going through the same thing. And she's like, okay. And so we went up there and I did it. And did they invite me to be on the worship team after that? No. But but people were clapping and so happy, and not because I have a good singing voice, but because I got up there and did it anyways. And that kind of thing, that besides boosting my confidence that nothing will hold me back, it's not like, signing me for a record deal. I'm not going to be the Taylor Swift of the world. But there have been things similar to what you said, the story about saying yes without allowing yourself even time to back out. And it was reminding me of being in a room in my Sunday school class, and we're sitting around in a circle, and everybody had said their prayer concerns, and they're like, okay, who's going to pray? And not one person in that room would pray out loud because everybody's scared to pray out or to speak in front of people. We're going to get it wrong. We don't know what to say. We don't want to mess up. And in that moment, I thought, what a shame that not one person is willing to speak these words over all of these situations. And I left that moment saying, if anybody were to ever ask me again, I'm going to say yes. And that was probably 15 years ago. And a situation had come up, but a month after that, of someone asking me to speak on a topic that was Christian based in front of women, and and pray over them and stuff. And I was like, ugh. And I remember like in my bathtub crying the night before. I'm like, why did I say yes to this? Oh my gosh. But here I am 15 years later, and I host, because I have another podcast aside from this one, Prayers for My Mom, and I host a podcast where I pray 4 days out of the week over other people. Way back when I was scared and I wasn't willing to do it in that moment, but decided I'm not ever going to let that opportunity pass me up, to fast forward 15 years later to how I'm able to be used in this way now. And I think that's why this is so important. And you talking about this and you sharing this and teaching other people and sharing your personal experience with it, because there's so many things that we all have these desires inside of us. And you said it earlier, it's like we want to, but we don't do it because of this fear that's holding us back. But really we want to, but we're scared of putting ourselves out there and being vulnerable in that way. And when we choose to say yes anyways and move forward, it is just like endless in the possibility of the people out there that can be helped and served with whatever the skill set that you have. Like for Jen, for you, it's helping women like live very intentional lives. And because you're willing to step up and say yes, there are women out there that are being free from this life that they've just been kind of like going through the motions with. But because you're willing to say yes, you're helping them in this area. So just thinking on that, it's just like, wow, if we all just said yes, and then we said, okay, now we got to figure out. We got to figure out.
Yeah, it's not about knowing all the answers. It's not about the how. It's because look, like so many, you see all these studies of people at the end of life, right? And their biggest regrets. And you hear this all the time, that I regret not doing things. more often than you hear someone say, oh, I really regretted this thing I did. Most often it's the things that they didn't do that becomes these regrets. And when you want to live a full life and when you want to love the life that you're living and go for your dreams and do big things and maybe do things that are completely different than you're doing already, it's those things don't come by constantly saying no, by shutting things down, by letting that resistance, scare you off. It's and you never know which thing that you say yes to. It could be completely unrelated to your dream, but like you don't know how that's going to have a ripple effect and like get the ball rolling and get you where you ultimately wanted to be, because that's what it all comes back to for, I try to encourage, these women that they are worth it. There's never a perfect time. You don't have to wait until your kids are grown and out of the house. Like, speak up and say that you have something that you want for yourself. And, don't be afraid of the guilt you're going to feel, and don't be afraid of the rejection. And, people like me too, where I have a successful career and I go to start something online, and you're going to have lots of naysayers and people that just don't understand it, and people that say, why would you give up this high paying corporate job to try to start something online? And like, who are you? Like, what makes you an expert? I mean, there's so many things that are going to come at you. But if you don't say yes, if you don't try it, I think that's going to be a way bigger regret than if you do something and it doesn't turn out the way you wanted. Because you know what, like, there's no like path like this, right? The path is like this. And so for every up there's a down, and then you twist and turn and you do a loop and you're back where you started, but it's taught you something, so you're not at the beginning again, you're wiser, like all those things you hear. And trying, I know we're at the very end of the call, but I promised Scarlett that I would really try to come on and be vulnerable. And honestly, one of the reasons that I'm afraid to do that, I mean, well, lots of reasons, right? Rejection and judgment and, embarrassment and all the things. But when you talk about me wanting to start this journey and wanting to start a business and doing something outside of a career that I've worked at really hard and done really well at and been successful at, it's because a couple years back, my mom got diagnosed with breast cancer. See, like I told her, like, and I don't want to cry. And it's still, as you can see, my mom is alive and well, and she's got through her treatments, and, like, we don't know that it'll never come back or anything like that, or, we're past it completely, but it was super hard. I'm very close with my mom. She's, a single mom that raised, 3 kids, and that sudden, like, that mortality, right? That sense of she could be gone tomorrow terrified me. Not even just to lose her, which would have been devastating, but the sense of, I started to think when my mom's retired from a long career, was like, some people have put this, retirement up on a pedestal, right? But the reality is a lot of people are forced into early retirement, or their health doesn't hold up, or, they get to retirement, but they're scraping by. They don't have the means to do all these amazing things that people envision in their retirement. She doesn't have extra money to travel. She doesn't have, she's not married. She doesn't have a partner, built in to do all these things with. And it started to get me to think, like, my mom had to work really hard to raise 3 kids on her own. And I started thinking, oh God, what were my mom's dreams? And then I was like, I have no idea. I have no idea if my mom had to put things aside because she was a single mom, or because she never had an opportunity, or because she was scared to say yes. Like, and then I started feeling like how sad that was for my mom. Like, I felt sad for my mom that could have been the scenario. And then she got sick, and I was like, and what if this is it? What if she never has that chance to do something she's always wanted to do, or to go for a dream, or take a trip, or, whatever that is. And it got me thinking, do I want to look back in 20 years in my career and be like, I wish I had I always wanted to. I don't want to have that. So that was a big driving piece to why I started this journey for myself. And this journey then developed and grew into something where I'm like, I'm learning a lot of things along the way, and I am a big researcher, and so I like accumulate all this knowledge, and I'm like, well, you know what? More people need to hear this message. More people need to know that, like, you can't wait until the weekend. You can't wait until the summer. You can't wait until next year. You can't wait until your kids graduate college. You can't wait until retirement. Like, you need to start looking at what you really want, identifying those like priorities and those dreams and goals. And then you have to start being intentional about putting those things into your life, and so that your life feels good now and as you're living it and through the journey, and not just waiting for a time where you're going to get to say yes. Start saying yes now. So it does go back to the whole fear part of it, is that I was fearful that I would look back and feel like my life had just passed me by. That I was so busy working and feeling like I had to take care of my children and always put them first 100% of the time. And it was selfish for me to ever want something for me as the person, that I didn't want that for me. And I also didn't want that for my kids and my daughter specifically, because I didn't want my daughter feeling that way. Like, mom didn't get to do this because she was busy raising us, or mom didn't do this dream because, she was always working, and so it's taking not only opportunities, but taking the initiative to start having more yeses in your life overall, because I think that's when you start really living, and you really start, experiencing so much more than when you're just like, wake up, get the kids off to school, go to work, come home, make dinner, check the homework, go to bed. Like, when your days are just that all the time, and there's nothing wrong with any of those things. And those things can be very fulfilling for you. And if you don't want anything more than that right now, that's fantastic. But when you're setting aside all these things that you always wanted, or you feel like, I can't do this because I'm a working mom, or I can't do this because I have a 9 to 5, or I can't do this because I'm too old, or I can't do this because I already have a career and I can't start over. Like, whatever those reasons are, you realize that, like, that is, again, it's sort of like, it's all masked in fear. It's all that, what if I do try something and it doesn't work out? Okay, but I'd rather end up with life that's like, oh, well, that didn't work out. Then what if I did that? What if I had just taken that leap? What if I had just said yes? What if I tried this thing? It's the not knowing what would have happened by saying yes that I think is going to be such a bigger weight on you, down the road. And even today, I'm sure you can look back and say, oh God, what if I had just done this thing, or gone on that trip, or, said yes to an opportunity. And by building that, that muscle of saying yes, of not letting resistance, paralyze you, not letting your overthinking brain, because I'm still an overthinker, not letting your overthinking brain override what your real desires are. I think you're going to look back and be like, yeah, I embarrassed myself on stage, or yes, someone rejected me, or someone said, well, are you really a success because you only have X amount of followers? Or, well, you're not making as much money with this new thing you're doing than with your old thing, so that's a loss. I don't think any of those things are losses. Those are things that are moments of growth and places where I've learned and grew along the way, that leads me ultimately to where I want to be down the road.
Yeah. Well, for one, I just want to say bravo for being vulnerable, because you sharing that story, that's the beauty of vulnerability. I know that that's the hardest and the scariest part, is being vulnerable. But when we can do that, that's what connects with so many people out there that are sitting in that same place. Because I know we went through what you went through when we started having our parents pass away. Same situations too, where some of them, it's like they waited till they retired to retire to start living, and then they didn't live very long after they retired. And it's like, we don't want that for us. And so for us to make this drastic change in our life, it is hard because your family members looking at you like, you're crazy. Like, who are you? Like, we worked 30 plus years to get to where we're at. And you think you can just quit your job and say, hey, we're going to just go travel the world or what have you, and do our own thing. It's like, and then when that doesn't work out and we have to pivot and we have to shift, and it's just all of this, but we get one life. We get one life to do these things with, and we get to choose what that looks like. And so saying the yes, but it's these moments of reality checks, like with you and with your mom, that it's like, wow, okay, we need to look at life. I don't want to just keep moving through every day and not living this life that I had envisioned, especially for you that are listening and that you are a blended family, you are a stepmom or a biological mom, and your whole focus is these children and raising them up. And in the process, you aren't doing anything for yourself. And you feel like you're being selfless by giving up anything that you desire, but you're giving and you're giving and you're giving. And sometimes it's being rejected and, just not appreciated. And then you wake up the next day and you do it all over. If you took time to begin to really do these things like Jenna's talking about, really be intentional and ask, what do you want out of life? And begin to say yes, and go out there and seek opportunities, or when opportunities find you saying yes to them and you begin to fill yourself up in these areas, then you can show up for your family in such a more impactful way. When we stop, I think we can focus so much on our kids that we can smother them sometimes, because our whole life revolves around them. When they can see us living life and doing things that we enjoy, we're really building them up too. And today we've been talking about doing things that scare you, or that, fearful things. And that doesn't always have to be even a career thing. It could be simply, I remember wanting so bad to be able to tell certain family members, I love you, on the phone. But because it wasn't ever said to me, I would want to say the words before I hung up, because I was scared that they weren't going to be here much longer. But it was such a habit not to. And I just like, okay, I want to say it, but what if it's weirds them out or whatever? And so I just started saying it after the end of phone calls. I love you. And then they're like, oh, and you can tell it threw them off at first. I love you too. And then it became natural for us. And now I don't have to look back and say, I never did that. Or it might be your stepchild that you want to have a relationship with them, but you're scared of inviting them to do something because you're afraid they're going to reject you in the process. And they might reject you, but you put yourself out there, and you put yourself out there. And then what happens when they do say yes? And then you do start to make these connections and these relationships. And so it's whatever that thing. And would you agree, Jen, there's this feeling inside of you that just kind of like, it just like catches you. And that's when you have that moment of run and hide or move forward in it. Would you agree?
Oh yeah. I mean, you said it right. It's that you're more afraid of not living. Like everyone's afraid of dying, right? Whether they want to say it or not. But like, I think the more appropriate thing is being afraid of not living while you are alive. Like looking back, having those regrets and all those things. And it all culminates in that like moment where it's like everything inside of you is like, oh my God, I can't do this, or I don't want to do this, or what's going to happen? What if? You've got to start flipping that script on your brain and say like, right, what if? Like, what good could come out of this? What amazing thing could happen? How good could this feel? Instead of like, will I feel embarrassed? Will this ruin my life? Will this, blow up a relationship? Will this whatever? It's starting to be like thinking of those what ifs as opportunities and not the worst case scenario. Because someone at one point, I don't know where I heard it for the very first time, but they said, there's no point in worrying, because the worst thing you could imagine is probably not even one of a million possibilities of all the bad things that could possibly happen. So like, why obsess about it? That thing that you think might go wrong might go wrong, but so what? Like what? Like, is it really life shattering? And you start to think like, well, as much as it could blow up things in a bad way, God, it could blow up things in a really good way. But by doing anything, you kind of take that like slow road and that middle line. But then do you really feel good? Do you really get anything out of that? Like, well, it's sort of the safer path. It's the, I might not, you can equate it to better have loved and lost than not to have loved at all thing, right? It's like, yeah, like, this having this amazing relationship was awesome. And yes, it didn't happen, but would you have wanted to never experience being in love or, all the good things that come with it too? So sometimes things don't work out, but would you just not want to have any experiences at all? So yeah, it's really just about being more afraid of not actually living your life. And that I think is what drives me and what I remind myself of, because like I want to say again, it's not that I don't get scared. It's not that you do things once and all of a sudden everything seems easy. It's not that way at all, but it's telling yourself and proving and building that muscle of saying yes, that makes you realize that the benefits of doing it are so much greater than shutting it down and living fearfully and not having anything to look back on, except for the regrets of not doing those things.
If someone wanted to follow you on social media or get involved in any of whatever you have next going on, because do you have one of your show up for yourself challenges coming up here pretty soon?
I do. It's going to be my third year doing it. I did a show up for yourself challenge on Instagram 2 years ago where I went live every single day, and it was a challenge for myself. And it was a challenge for myself to show up live because at that time doing a live was like terrifying. So that was part of the doing something scary part. But I showed up for myself in different ways throughout the month, sometimes intentionally and sometimes just as opportunities came up. And I came and just did lives and reflecting on those things and showing people different ways that you can put yourself first and be a priority. And so I'm doing one in the month of July. Again, I'm going to be doing it largely through my membership, which is not open for new members right now. So I have a self-care, it's called Not Your Mama Self-Care Membership, or Collective, sorry. And it is a membership that I run. We're going to do the whole shebang in that group, but I am going to have a piece of it in Instagram again for people who aren't part of my membership, people who, are kind of quiet lurkers, like they like watching, but they don't want to interact, or they're not ready for it yet, or they just want to see what it's all about. So that would be a really great thing to come and be a part of. So you can follow me on Instagram at Thrive by Action. I also have a Facebook page, although I'm really like never over there. Instagram is really where you can find me most of the time.
Instagram is where all the people are at.
Exactly. And my younger friends are all convincing me I need to be on TikTok too, but I'm just not there yet. So I have one, but I am not over there quite yet. So I know, I feel like, yeah, it's definitely, but a lot of people who I think connect with me more really are of that age range that they are probably more Instagrammers than TikTokers, but you never know. I welcome all. Anyone who could get anything from what I say, I would love to, have them hear the words. So that is the best place to do it. Follow me there. You can also sign up for my email list. I am not a fantastic emailer. I'm trying to be more consistent with that all the time. But I do still get comments from people on my list periodically that are like, I look forward to when you write your emails. Your emails are so good. I'm like, really? Because I'm just like, again, self-doubt and all the things. I'm like, no one reads these. They don't care. But every once in a while, I'll get someone who just speaks up and says something or responds to one. And I'm like, okay, I'm still going to stick with this. And one day I'll get better about it. But I'm sending them, I don't blast you with emails. I send things out probably once or twice a month. As I have events or things like that, you might get a few more, just making sure people know what's going on. But that's another good place to come and sort of stay apprised of anything that I have going on.
Okay. Do you still have the list on there? So if they sign
I do.
up
And I will give Scarlett a link so you can sign up for the membership. And I have a self-care ideas list. It's like over 100 things long. Lots of things on there you probably wouldn't have ever thought of on your own. Just you wouldn't have maybe even thought that they were self-care. And you'll get that when you sign up for the membership, or sorry, when you sign up for the email list.
Awesome. And it's good stuff. I have went through that list and done a lot of them and found out that I enjoy a lot of things that I would have never tried on my own. So yeah, the links will be in the show notes of the podcast and the YouTube. So go and get signed up for that. Get that perfect summertime for you to just start showing up for yourself and doing these different things. Stop focusing so much on the things that you're not getting to do maybe with your family members, or focusing on the kids and all they're doing. Fill your cup up too. We need to do that as moms. So thank you, Jen, so much for showing up, for exposing us to all the things fear-based and doing it scared anyways, and the importance of it, and then being willing to be vulnerable with us here as well, because I know that is going to speak to so many people in our blended family community here. So we appreciate you. And blended family, do it scared. Whatever it is, when you get that feeling that starts coming inside you, that inner battle that you want to do it, but you have all of these excuses, why not? Just do it scared. Say yes, and then figure it out. We'd love to hear from you. What are some of these things that you've been scared to do? And then let us know when you have some victory. Until then, remember to enjoy your blended family. Bye, guys. Hey, have you heard of Get Out Pass? I hadn't either. I saw it on a friend's social media and I had to immediately look to see if my state had it, because she lives in a different state than me. I was like, oh heck yeah, where can we sign up? If you are home for the summer and looking for things to do, you want to get yourself a Get Out Pass. You pay one time for each of your family members, a one-time fee, and it gets you in to all of these places around your community for free. It is so worth it. When I heard about this, I began to look into it and I was like, are you kidding me? It costs this much to get into every single one of these places. This is thousands of dollars that we are saving, and now we have the opportunity, because of the one time that we paid, to get into all of these places. These are water parks, climbing places, jumping places, arts and craft areas, boardwalks, theme parks, type activities. Then I took that list and I sent it to all of my kids and asked them, hey, which one of these things do you want to do? Now I have plans all summer long, even with my adultish children, and of course the grandbaby. These bigger cities are partnered with Get Out Passes. So go and check now. See if you have a city nearby that allows you to use this pass, and then get it for your family. It will pay for itself in 1 to 2 visits, I promise you. And if you're part of our blended family community, use the code BFAM and you get 30% off. You buy it one time and you have all year to go to all of these places one time. Go get it, sign your family up, and do not sit at home this summer with all them kids. Get out the house and make some memories. Thanks for joining us today. We hope this episode has been a blessing and encouraged your family journey.
Make sure you stay connected with us and join our weekly Blended Family newsletter. We send an email out every Friday morning full of support and encouragement.
And when you join, we also want to give you a free gift. So go get yours today. The link is in the show notes below.
Have an amazing day. Remember to enjoy the journey with your blended family, and we'll see you on the next episode.